Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
So we have seen in our previous classes what is GHG emissions, impact of GHG emissions, what are the policies and regulations that India is trying to foster. Now we will come to what is India's stand on carbon neutrality. What does India as a country feel for carbon neutrality? So now this lecture and the forthcoming lectures, it will discuss about India's current economic, social, environmental and energy characteristics, previous policies for decarbonization, the statements India has given in different climate forums, and the points that has not been included in the given statement, because if we as a country have to be very careful in what we declare that we would do, commit, and what we cannot do. Certain things are necessary for the development of the country. So what is India's stand on it? Now these lectures will also discuss about India's long-term low carbon development strategy, considering India has committed to be a carbon neutral country by the year 2070. So it's a very, very important commitment. India's long-term low carbon development strategy include India's approach to long low carbon development. So strategic low emissions development transitions, research and innovation, adaptation and resilience, mission life, lifestyle for environment and international cooperation. So these are the things that we will see in the forthcoming lectures. India, with its cultural and diverse cultural scenario, has enormous growth potential in terms of its large workforce, resource abundance and ability to attract investment. So, India's growth rates were very high until the COVID-19 pandemic. It was around 8.9% of annual growth, which is more than double the global average GDP growth rate. Though India's GDP shrunk by 7.3% due to COVID-19, the economy has again bounced back to its previous growth rate by the year 2022. Due to its size and current growth trajectory, India therefore exerts strong economic influence on sustainable development path of the world in the future, because a stronger economy has a lot of requirements. One of it is also related to building, and building requirement per se is not isolated or solitary. It is dependent on industry, and industry is dependent on electricity, and electricity source becomes very important to be carbon neutral. So, this economic because of this growth trajectory, India has a huge role to play in the sustainable development path in the future. So, Indian government has been focusing on fight against poverty since the beginning of 2000s. So, the share of India's population living under the national poverty line, it decreased steadily through the 2010s. This is as per World Bank report, a World Bank report which came out in 2021. But as per the latest estimates, India's urban households are more vulnerable to falling into poverty than they were before COVID-19, because one major reason for this could be because of humongous amount of migration that is happening, resulting in the urban poor. So, if you see here, the purchasing parity of India has increased phenomenally. So, you can see that the purchasing power, how it has, of course, here there was a mild slump. We all know why it is. It's because of the COVID. where we were not able to, and then we are projected to increase in this manner. If you look at the multidimensional poverty index of India, the percentage of people who are deprived, uh, that also has a significant impact on how we, for example, I would draw a line here. If you look at the standard of living, the standard of living in certain areas, in most of the areas is not very high. It has come down in certain areas. It has, because the the share of population, or the growth has. Okay. Let us look at India's current scenario in terms of environmental and energy characteristics. Now, that is very important. India's current scenario in terms of environmental and energy characteristics is directly related to the building industry and the construction industry. So, India has been ranked one of the world's highest GHG emitters over the recent decades, though its per capita emission remain below global average. So, you can see the GHG emission percentage of India. The total emission percentage of India forms this bulk. So, this forms the bulk of India's GHG emission. So, India is one of the third largest emitter of GHG in terms of quantity. But if you look in terms of GDP, India is way below, it is very, very low. So, there is a pressure on India to reduce this further, as much as there is pressure on other countries also, but India has tremendous pressure. And we are part of this lecture series because a lot of this emission relates to the building industry, and we as a fraternity have a role to reduce the GHG emission because of how we deal with in the building industry, the building construction industry. And if we look at this, look at China. China is having 30.9% and US is 13.5%. By GDP, they would be way ahead. Rest of the world, in comparison to what India is doing, look at rest of the whole world is 21.7% and India is 7.3%, which is giving us a good perspective of where we stand and how we ought to reduce this. Now, due to the large economy, India has been ranked one of the world's highest GHG emitters over the recent decades, though its per capita emission is much below the global average. In 2020, the Indian sectors which contributed the most to the emissions were power generation. Why? Because largely we are a coal based power generation, iron and steel manufacturing, and this is where we as a building construction fraternity must come together in reassessing what we are doing, and road transport. After the COVID-19 pandemic, the share of coal in power generation reached the highest in India in 2021 and pushing its emission 13% above 2020 levels. This is as per reports by IEA in the year 2022. So, coal continues to be a significant part of India's emission, and I will say India's economy also. Phasing out unabated coal from power generation and industry is a key policy challenge for India to align its emission with its current ambitions and commitment that it has given for what we would do in the future. So, these are all quite well known facts. So, now if we look at sector wise CO2 carbon dioxide emissions in India, we can see that electricity and heat producers, this is 51.3%, and this has got direct relationship to building industry. How? because we need a lot of electricity to run our not only buildings but also the products manufacture, which get into the building industry, is also dominated in this sector. And the next to that is the industries and transport. So, industry constitutes about 25% and transport constitute 13%. Residential is 3.9%. So, exclusive use by energy in the residential sector is 3.9%, an area of interest for us. So, if you look at GHG emissions of all sectors in comparison to the building construction sector, we can see that the building and construction sector alone consumes 32% of contribution to GHG emission, and all other sector put together is 68%. So, this is a matter of concern for us because this is in our hands, how we as designers can reduce this 32%, and that should be the focus of either our design or construction too. Let us look at India's current scenario when it comes to GHG emission gas wise scenario. In the emissions that come out, about 79% of emission is CO2 emission. So, 79% approximately 78.59 is CO2 emission. So, the energy sector accounted for 75% of the total GHG emissions for the year 2016. Electricity production was the single largest source in this category, and it accounted for about 40% of the national total GHG emissions in 2016. The manufacturing industries and construction together emitted about 18.5% of total emission from the energy sector. Transport contributed to 13% of emissions from the energy sector, with predominant share of 90% arising from road transport, followed by civil aviation, which was 6%, and railways is 3%. Domestic waterborne navigation is about 1% or slightly less than that too. In the year 2016, the other sectors together contributed about 10% to energy sector emissions, with approximately 60% share coming from the residential sector and 32% from the commercial sector, and the remaining 8% from biomass burnt for energy, which is non-CO2 emissions. Non-CO2 GHGs come from that, and agriculture and fisheries sector put together. So, this is the glimpse of, or this is the gist of the kind of emissions that have been coming out. And what is sad is that 79% is CO2 emissions approximately when we look at it gas wise, and then methane, which is, we have seen methane equivalent is about 21%, 21 to 28, that is the range we get from various literature. That accounts for 14.43%. Nitrous gases form 5.12%, and all other gases, they constitute 1.86. But this is also because of the initiative by the government to phase out CFCs. Otherwise, it would have been much more, and it would have been at a drastically bad position. Let us look at the previous policies for decarbonization in India. Now, India's NDC target was set in 2015 and aims to reduce emissions